Welcome back to Apex Sci-Fi. The galaxy often forgets that Earth is not just a garden world. It is a planet of extremes. It has jungles that breathe, oceans that crush, and deserts that kill. Most sentient species evolve in climate-controlled environments, but humans? Humans were forged in the furnace of the Rift Valley and the frozen wastes of the tundra. We don't just survive in harsh environments, we weaponize them. In the second year of the Terran Ascendance, the Ky'rath Legion, a hive mind of heavy, armored invaders, decided to bypass the human orbital defenses and land directly on Earth. They chose their landing site with cold, calculated logic. They chose the Atacama Desert in Chile. To the Ky'rath, it was the perfect staging ground. It was high, thin air for their thrusters, it was sparsely populated, and it was the driest place on the planet. They assumed the lack of water would cripple any human resistance. They didn't realize that for a human soldier, the Atacama isn't a barrier. It's a fortress. The Ky'rath spire ships, each one a mile-high needle of black obsidian and green energy, descended through the bruised purple sky of the Chilean highlands. 10 of them landed in a perfect geometric pattern, their impact shaking the Andes Mountains. They deployed their warwalkers, massive, six-legged insectoid mechs armed with heavy plasma lances. The Ky'rath High Commander, a creature of cold silicon logic, broadcasted a signal to the world: "We have claimed this waste. Your soil is now our foundation. Resistance is futile in this dead land. You cannot sustain a military here. Bow and we shall grant you a quick end." The response did not come from a diplomat. It came from the sand. Colonel Mateo Rojas sat in the command chair of the El Condor, a mammoth-class super-heavy tank. The El Condor was 100 tons of composite armor, twin 150mm railgun turrets, and enough internal air conditioning to keep the crew at a steady 20 degrees Celsius while the desert outside baked at 50. "They think it's a dead land," Rojas muttered, looking at the thermal sensors on his screen. "They don't know that the Atacama has been our training ground for 3 centuries. Rojas looked out at his wall. Stretched across the salt flats were 500 mammoth tanks and 1,000 Jaguar mechanized infantry carriers. Behind them sat the Rainmakers, mobile rocket batteries capable of saturating a square kilometer in seconds. This was the Iron Vanguard's 1st Desert Division. "All units, this is Rojas," he said over the secure, ground vibration comms. "The bugs think they're the only ones who can live in the dirt. Let's show them why humans have Death Worlder on our passports. Hold the line. Wait for the signal." The Ky'rath Legion moved forward. Their walkers glided across the sand, their energy shields shimmering. They fired their plasma lances, turning the desert sand into glass with every shot. They were fast, they were elegant, and they were utterly arrogant. They reached the 10-kilometer mark. "Rainmakers, open the sky," Rojas commanded. From 20 kilometers behind the human line, the mobile batteries spoke. Thousands of spite rockets screamed into the air, arching over the Andes and descending onto the Ky'rath Vanguard. These weren't standard explosives, they were grit bombs, specialized munitions filled with microfine volcanic glass and localized EMP bursts. The explosions filled the air with a massive, artificial sandstorm. The Ky'rath walkers, whose sensors relied on high-frequency light and thermal imaging, suddenly found themselves blind. The volcanic glass clogged their cooling vents and scratched their delicate sensor lenses. "Now," Rojas growled. "Engines at max charge." The Atacama shook. The 500 mammoth tanks accelerated, their massive treads churning up a wall of dust. They didn't use lasers. They used kinetic railguns. "T1 and T2, lock on the lead spire ship," Rojas ordered. "Load Sabo rounds." The El Condor's twin turrets hummed with electromagnetic power. Dun-dun. The 2 tungsten carbide slugs, moving at Mach 8, ignored the Ky'rath energy shields. The shields were designed to dissipate heat and reflect light. They couldn't stop 10 kilograms of solid metal moving at hypersonic speeds. The slugs punched through the shields of the lead walker and exited out the back, leaving a gaping, molten hole in the alien machine. The desert turned into a slaughterhouse of metal and fire. The human infantry, the Sandstalkers, emerged from the dunes. They weren't in the open, they were in deep, pre-dug trenches and hidden bunkers. They wore power armor that matched the color of the sand perfectly. They popped up behind the Ky'rath lines, firing heavy rail rifles into the exposed joints of the alien mechs. "For the Earth," the soldiers roared over the comms. Rojas pushed the El Condor into the heart of the Ky'rath formation. He was surrounded by alien walkers. Plasma bolts splashed against his tank's armor, melting the outer ceramic layer but failing to reach the cockpit. He felt the heat radiating through the floor, but he didn't slow down. Target the legs, Rojas yelled. If they can't walk, they can't fight. The mammoth tanks operated in V formations, focusing their fire on a single target at a time. It was a brutal, industrial style of warfare. While the Ky'rath were trying to perform precise surgical strikes, the humans were simply flattening everything in their path. The Ky'rath High Commander, watching from the safety of his spire ship, couldn't believe his eyes. Impossible, he hissed. Our technology is superior. Our armor is divine. Why are these mammals winning? Because they aren't fighting you, High Commander, his tactical AI responded, its voice flickering. They are using the environment. The heat, the dust, the altitude, they are conditioned for it. We are not. Our cooling systems are failing. Our sensors are offline. We are being hunted in a cage of our own making. The battle raged for 6 hours. The Atacama was no longer a desert. It was a graveyard of black obsidian and burning green fire. The Ky'rath attempted one final, desperate move. They activated the sunbeam from their primary spire ship, a massive orbital laser meant to glass the entire desert. Sir, the spire is charging, a technician yelled in Rojas's ear. Not on my watch, Rojas said. All tanks, divert power to the Goliath rounds. Each mammoth tank carried a single massive shell reserved for planetary defense. These shells were tipped with a miniature warp core. When they hit a target, they didn't just explode, they created a localized gravitational collapse. 500 tanks fired at once. The 500 Goliath rounds hit the primary Ky'rath spire ship simultaneously. The mile-high needle of obsidian didn't just break, it folded into itself. The gravitational pressure was so intense that the alien ship was crushed into a sphere the size of a house in less than 3 seconds. The sunbeam never fired. The remaining Ky'rath ships, seeing their flagship deleted from reality, attempted to lift off. But the humans were ready. The Jaguar infantry carriers opened their roofs, and thousands of manpads, surface-to-air missiles, were launched into the air. They weren't meant to destroy the ships, they were harpoon missiles. They slammed into the alien hulls and deployed massive reinforced carbon fiber cables that anchored the ships to the desert floor. You're not going anywhere, Rojas whispered. The human infantry swarmed the grounded spire ships. They used industrial plasma cutters to breach the hulls. The fighting inside was room to room, a nightmare of narrow corridors and alien shadows. But the humans had the advantage, they could breathe the thin, dry air. The Ky'rath, their life support systems failing, were gasping and weak. By sunset, the 1st Desert Division was standing on the ruins of the impenetrable base. Colonel Rojas stepped out of the El Condor. He took a long breath of the cold, dry night air. He looked at the smoking remains of the Ky'rath Legion. His armor was covered in dust and alien oil. He pulled a small flask of water from his belt and took a sip. The wall of Atacama, he said to his sergeant, who was leaning against the tank's tread. The bugs thought they were coming to a wasteland, sir, the sergeant replied, wiping his visor. Yeah, Rojas said, looking at the stars. They forgot that humans are the only species that looks at a wasteland and sees a home. And they definitely forgot that we're the only ones crazy enough to fight for it. The Ky'rath survivors were taken as prisoners of war. They were the first aliens to ever be held in a human military prison on Earth. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The humans have defended their home. They didn't use a fleet. They used the dirt and the steel of their own world. The Galactic Council revised their assessment of Earth again. They realized that invading the human homeworld was not a military mission. It was a death sentence. Because if the humans could turn the Atacama into a fortress, what could they do with the rest of the planet? This has been Apex Sci-Fi. Every grain of sand on Earth is a bullet waiting to be fired. If you enjoyed this desert defense by the Iron Vanguard, hit that like button. Comment below, which part of Earth would you choose to defend against an alien invasion? Subscribe for the next front, the jungle of Kthan. The wall is held. The desert is silent.